Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your host for the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Little Less Fear podcast. Today, I'd like to introduce Bob DePasquale. He's a purpose-driven impact maker. Did I say your name correctly?
You got it, man. Lino, you nailed it.
Okay, great. He believes that everyone has the ability to make a positive impact in our world. When Bob was only 18, he moved to New York for college, and while in football training camp and in just 5 days before September 11, 2001, he was diagnosed with cancer. In a very short period of time, his young, healthy life was turned upside down. He was forced to shift his focus to treating an extremely aggressive form of a terrible disease and coping with the effect of the most recent terrorist attacks. Miraculously, he was physically healed in just 4 months, but mentally, it took years. It wasn't until Bob identified his purpose that he realized the value of his battle with cancer. Welcome so much for sharing thank you for sharing your courageous journey here on A Little Less Fear podcast, and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so excited. Great introduction. I know it's a little crazy story to drop on everyone right away, but powerful force in my life. Just really glad to be here, Lino.
Thank you. So tell us where you're at. I see a personal finance image behind you, and I'm assuming that everything that you've gone through has taken you towards the journey that you're on now and where that image is now reflecting.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're watching on the video here, you see my screen back here. That's a book that I published in December. I'm working on the audiobook right now. And my journey has been a little crazy. You're probably thinking, well, how does cancer and what 9/11 and all the things that are part of your story have to do with personal finance? Well, the way it all ties together is that I believe we all have certain gifts and talents and skills that we can all use to make the world a better place. And that's why you talked about in the intro of me being an impact maker. Well, I worked in the financial field for the past 13 years, and my business partner and I left our company about a year ago to start our own, which has been a great, amazing journey, challenges, ups and downs. We can talk about that too. But I just felt that I had some things that I had to get out there that I had learned over the years about technology and finance. And that's what the book's all about. And I really was hoping that I could reach a larger group of people that I could actually serve in my business by writing a book. So I want to get some thoughts out there. But what I realized, interestingly enough, it's not really about what I knew. It's about what I was more curious about. The best advice that I got before writing the book was it's not about what you know, it's about what you want to know. So the amount of research that I put in for this book, even though I worked in the financial field for well over a decade, was a lot of work. And I'm proud of that. And so I was really hoping that knowledge that I had, plus all the research, I interviewed almost 50 people, and there's a bunch of quotes in the book, some good thoughts about how to use technology for positive in our life. So I was hoping that will make the world a better place. We'll make the world a better place somehow. So appreciate you asking about it. And that's just part of my journey, just a small portion.
I like what you said right now, where it's not about what you know, it's about what you want to know. What did you want to know?
I want to know specifically why people felt so stressed about their money and the technology that we live with today. And I spent many years working with families, thousands, literally, no exaggeration here, thousands of families I spoke with and counseled about their financial matters. And a lot of them would come to us during stressful times. Very rarely was it, hey, things are going great, Bob. Come help me out.
Right.
Let's have a conversation. There were times, and I noticed that it usually was not a one-time event or something that happened overnight. Sure, there were times where people, God forbid, people died or someone got married or had a baby, and there was a pretty short-term event that needed to be, that it would affect someone's financial position. But most of the time, it was things over time that just stacked up and created the stress in their life. And I learned so much about the psychology behind money, the monetary system that we live in, and the way that the relationship that we have with our finances. And it was so important that I understood that, because in my work, I did everything that I can to fix people's situations on the financial side. but what I couldn't do is fix them their emotional pain and
Right.
trauma that they had related to their money. So I learned over time that it wasn't isolated incidents, but what I didn't know was exactly why and how that all worked, and what exactly was the psychology behind people's stress, and what was the technical aspects behind the technology that affects us these days. I mean, think about it. I mean, on the back of my book, there's a statistic. There's over 2,100 times a day, people on average swipe, touch, click, get notifications on the
Wow.
phone. That's a
That's
lot.
intense. Yeah.
Yeah, we are overstimulated, well overstimulated, in my opinion. So I did the research on that, and you asked the question, what did I have to learn, or what was the research about? Why was that so important? It's because I really didn't know, and I needed to understand that. And now that I didn't even know what I didn't know, if you know what I mean. So as I was writing
Right.
the book, it kind of morphed, it morphed into more than just here's 17 chapters, each on a different financial topic and how to do it right. It's way, way more than that. And I'm glad, because I don't think that really would have served people as well. There's plenty of books out there on how to invest, how to save,
Right.
how to budget. And that's all in here. If you're looking for a new way and some stories around that, absolutely, this is the book for you. But it's more than just the technical parts of personal finance. It's the psychology behind it and how you can use the tools that we have in today's world to help you make wiser decisions. And honestly, just live a healthier, less stressed life.
Right. What can you tell us? Thank you for that. What can you tell us as far as the psychology behind it? Some of the things, I'm sure there's so much behind it, but what are some of the most important things that stand out for you or stood out for you?
Yeah, sure. It's the number one thing. And, as a financial planner, advisor, any number of different titles that I've had over the years in my roles, and now working with families who are generous, who, want to give away their dollars, who want to manage them well and give them away. It doesn't matter any of those scenarios. The number one thing that I found is that the joy and fulfillment that we get from things and situations is way higher, or more intense than the joy we get from possessions, and exponentially higher than we get from just money itself. I see money as a tool, and I learned in my work, but also kind of doubled down on it in the book, that people are not looking, whether they realize it or not, they're not looking to just have $1 million or have $100 million. They're looking for something beyond that. It's a tool for something in their life. And the relationship that you have with that tool is so important. And here's one tip that I can give you that it kind of blew me away, but I realized it when I was going through some of this stuff. And there's a story in the book about this that I didn't even realize what it meant until I started doing the research for the book. A lot of people will give you the basic tip or strategy to spend less than you make. Makes sense for most people, right?
Sure.
If you make $1,000, you can't spend $1,100 because you don't have that $100. And a lot of people will also tell you shouldn't spend the whole 1,000. You should spend maybe 800 and then save 200 if you can. Simple concepts. But what I realize is that there's so much advice or intention around saving and not spending our money and investing and putting it away, that we see it as something that's so we have such a desire for pleasure from items out there. And I talk about all the stimulation that we get in the world these days, those over 2,100 times that we interact with our mobile device a day, or some kind of device. What I found is that we actually should spend money. And here's what I mean by that. Instead of thinking, I got to save every last penny that I earn, and then feeling like the need to purchase things because you see an ad on Instagram or social media channel, and you're like, oh man, I got to spend something. I got to do something to make myself happy. I had a long week at work, or a stressful time in the family. What I found is that you should actually identify maybe one or two things that are within reason, but that really actually bring you joy more than other things that are really healthy for you. Identify those one or two things and put them in your budget. And I'm telling you, I'm giving you permission right now, buy them all the time. I mean, if it, some people say, I got to stop going to Starbucks because it's killing me every week. Okay, if it's just an ancillary thing and you really don't like coffee, you just like going to Starbucks because it's fun, maybe you should cut it out. But if Starbucks is one of those top two things that just makes you feel good, you enjoy the atmosphere, maybe it's productive, you're a student and it's good for you, you go there and study, whatever it is. If that's actually one of those priorities, sure, it's worth their $5 on occasion to go to Starbucks. And if
Right.
you purchase that coffee, that latte, whatever it is, and it makes you comfortable, it puts you in a comfortable position, provides you some joy, you're way, way, way less likely to be tempted to buy something that's useless to you, that the only reason why you're buying is because your neighbor has it or because you saw an ad on TikTok or whatever it is. And that, I mean, I cannot tell you how big this has been in my life and also how big it's been in a lot of the people that my business partner and I have served over the years. So believe it or not, I'm actually telling you a wise financial decision is to spend on something that you really like. Now, don't go buying a Lamborghini every week or putting money on your credit card. No, I'm talking about money that you actually have and can afford. Spend it consistently on the things that bring you joy. And you know what? I'll give you an extra benefit to this that I didn't even think about also until I started writing the book is, believe it or not, I have so much less junk in my house now because I don't want all that stuff. I know the couple little things my wife and I enjoy. We spend money on that and we
Yeah.
are absolutely content.
That's great.
So it's cool.
So when you started figuring this out, what were some of the things that brought you joy? And how did that journey actually start for you when you started to figure out, you know what? Because it sounds like you also went through a process of elimination.
Yes, that's a great way to put it, a process of elimination. I don't think I was ever a big a big freelance spender by any means. I mean, my mom was a teller and grew up in a bank. I grew up when my mom was working in a bank. And so she taught me the basics of saving. I was never someone who liked to spend a lot of money, but it wasn't, I needed to change my habits when I became an adult and I started earning my own paycheck. And so over the years, it really did take me some time. I mean, I'm a sucker for kitchen utensils and tools and appliances and things. And I love to cook. I love to spend money on those sort of things. And it can get a little bit overboard. I also really like to eat. So there was a time in my life I probably went out to eat too much. I also had a little bit of thing for video games for a while there. And I thought I had all this expendable income. Well, I can just use it. Looking back, I wish I would have saved thousands of dollars over the years, but I realized that it wasn't the case. And so I probably need to make wiser decisions. So I've been able to isolate in my life the few things that I like to spend money on. So I love to spend time with my wife. So occasionally we like to travel. So I know that I don't feel guilty. I don't feel bad about taking a flight somewhere or going to visit someone. The small little things in my life, I love. I don't know if you're into this, but I love fantasy sports. So I love competing with my friends in a fantasy football league. Now, I don't spend a lot of money on it. It's not like I'm breaking the bank, but I'm totally cool with playing in a fantasy football league and spending a couple bucks with my friends. And that brings me joy. It's something that I enjoy doing. And so I don't feel guilty about that at all. And like I said, I have way less junk in my house. I don't have little trinkets and toys. Now, we don't have kids. Gosh, some of my friends who have kids, they got stuff all over the place. That's a whole nother, that's a whole other discussion. But I hope that answers your question. For me, I really just needed to simplify. And it's family and it's fantasy sports, a couple things that I splurge on occasionally, and I'm good. You could not catch me doing a one-click buy on Amazon ever, because I don't have those temptations anymore. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, that's an excellent feeling actually. And I can also, what I also take from this is that you're also learning a level of gratitude with what you already have.
Absolutely. Gratitude's so important. I have dedicated gratitude time every morning. I'm glad you brought this up, actually. Uh, there's a YouTube talk, TED talk by a lady by the name of Amy Campbell. And you can look it up, Amy Campbell's YouTube talk. And she does an excellent job of talking about how it's more about what we have than what we.
Right.
And she has a quote. I'm gonna butcher this quote, man, but
Sure.
it's something along the lines of, instead of asking ourselves what we can't afford to lose, it's about asking ourselves what we have to give. And
Nice.
it's an amazing mindset shift. And gratitude
Love that.
is so important. Gratitude, and it's not, and some people will say, well, Bob, I can't, if I'm having a rough day, I can't just fake gratitude. And that's not what gratitude is. Gratitude is not about false positivity. Gratitude is simply about identifying the things that you do have that you may take for granted if you didn't. And there's
Mhm.
little simple things in life that a lot of us, I think, take for granted. Like, for example, I mean, the fact that we can be on this computer and have this technology, I mean, how cool is that? Like,
Yeah, it's
we thought the
incredible. It
pandemic,
really is.
yeah, I mean, and really, I mean, the technology and just to be able to communicate like this is cool. So I'm grateful for that. So yes, gratitude time, man. Some people do, there's a gratitude journal practice out there. You can search on the internet. There's actually a couple of them if someone was looking for a tool. But it can be as simple as just waking up in the morning and opening your eyes and picking one or two things that you just want to be grateful for.
The talk that you were speaking about, Amy Campbell, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, where
Mhm.
she meant you said that she mentioned it's what you have to give. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in the financial space.
Hmm.
A lot of the families that actually, I shouldn't say that. Now that we've made this transition, my business partner and I opened our own firm. All of the families that we work with are generous people, and we just that's our wheelhouse. We love working with them. And so, but what's interesting is though, even though we work in the financial space, it's not really about the money. Yeah, we work with the technical stuff, taxes and estate planning and investments and insurance. Sure, I love that stuff. It's interesting to me because that's what I do for a living. I don't think I would do that. But when it comes to the giving mindset, it's not ultimately about the money. It's about the resources that you have, whatever types they are, whether it is your treasures, whether it's your time, maybe it's talents that you have. For some people, it's just the influence that they have. They have connections and they can make the world a better place for other people. And I would say a good 75% of the conversations that we have with people and their giving and about having is about identifying what they have that can be beneficial for other people. And I think most people in this world will be surprised that they have an excess of something that someone else could benefit from. And if it is money, that's great. Money is a powerful tool. We talked about it a lot already today, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could just be your skill, a helping hand, a shoulder to cry on. It could be your home. It could be resources. A good example is this. So my wife's a kindergarten teacher. Her classroom is filled with books that she's got from other people who have donated them. And you would think that it would be a bunch of junk for certain people, but for her students over the years, it's been powerful lessons. So you never know what you have that you can provide for other people. And I mentioned earlier, a pretty cool practice is if you can go through that budgeting and practice and spend on the things that do bring you joy that I talked about earlier, you probably will identify a bunch of things that you own and possessions that you have that
Yeah.
really aren't that important to you. And that's stuff that you have that could ultimately help someone else. So identifying what you do have is really, really important. And it's actually interesting. You underestimate the value of certain things. What's one man's junk or trash is another man's treasure. And
Right.
so you probably take for granted a lot of those extra junky things that don't really have a lot of meaning to you. So you probably, I'm not guaranteeing this, but if you're out there listening, watching, you probably have something that you really don't need, but someone else desperately wants.
Yes. Yeah, like I have too many shoes. I really do. I don't need that many shoes, but yeah, thank you so much for this. This is really impactful, actually. It's gratifying and it's empowering, and
Mhm.
I'm very motivated to give at the end of this. So thank you so much for that. I'm
Yeah.
curious, how long it took for you to get into. Actually, there's two things I want to say before I ask you the second question. My first question before that was, I'd like to know, when you went through your cancer and you
Mhm.
battled through it and then you healed from it. Is this when you started to have these realizations, or did you have these realizations before then and was kind of like on a pause when you went through your treatment?
Yeah. So when I was 18, I'm going to give you the quickest version of this story I possibly can, but I think it
Sure.
really illustrates what we're talking about and it will answer your question. So when I was 18, I thought I was invincible. I think most people
Yeah,
think
most
they're
18
invincible.
year
At
olds
least,
too. Yeah.
yeah, right. You think you can just jump off a cliff and do anything, right? So
Right.
that's who I was. Absolutely. You read in the intro, I was going up to training camp. I was playing football, and I love that sport. It's still meaningful in my life. Obviously, I'm retired, if you will, now. I can't play anymore, but I had a great time playing in college. But my freshman year, I went up there, And within a couple of days, I thought I had this groin injury. And another thing that's extremely deceiving in life is how much you use your groin muscle. If you've ever pulled a groin muscle out there, if you can't stand, walk, definitely can't run, it's very, very hard. So I was doing this rehab exercise. I was on a three-wheeled stool shimmying across the training room, now a college training room, at 5:30 in the morning before a training camp practice. There's 100 people. It's loud, it's busy. And it's very, very challenging to do this rehab exercise because I'm dodging people. It's part of the exercise. And the head trainer at the school at the time, really a small guy, super nice, stands up and basically calls me out in front of the whole team. It's super loud in there. The way I remember it, it got like dead silent. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but he's like, Bobby, they called me Bobby at the time. Bobby, you got to get back onto the field. Like you can't, like he's basically calling me a wimp. So I'm getting called out by the head trainer. One thing led to another. I had a more serious conversation. He sent me to a doctor. I went through a series of tests. I met with my oncologist. Now I'm 18 years old. I'm technically an adult by myself in a strange place in New York. My oncologist gives me, not even the oncologist, excuse me, the doctor that was doing all these tests told me they found cancer. Bobby, you have cancer. And I was like blew my mind. Didn't even know what to say. My parents had a trip scheduled for months already to come up to see my first game. So they were already flying up this day. We knew I wasn't going to play in the game at this point. But my mom called me right as they got out of the doctor's appointment. She's like, we're in the car. We're headed back to your uncle's house, which is where we were going to meet. My uncle lived in New York. And she was like, how'd it go? And I was like, Mom, the doctor said I have cancer. And I could just tell like the other side of the phone, like my mom was devastated. My dad was on the other side, like, Susan, what's going on? Like he wasn't even on the phone, but he could tell something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so we met back at my uncle's house. It was panic. We didn't know what to do. I drove. It took me 15 minutes. Excuse me. I'm skipping ahead. We got back to my uncle's house. We didn't know what to do. A couple of days went by. My uncle's best friend comes over to the house. On the day it was actually supposed to be my first game. Obviously, I wasn't playing the game at this point. He came over and you talk about gratitude and thankfulness and generosity. He gave my parents his car keys. He had never met them before and was like, hey, Bob and Susan, here's my keys. Take my car, do with it whatever you like, whatever you need to take your son across all your tests and everything. They were like overwhelmed with joy. Like they didn't know what to say. Like they were just so emotional. He said goodbye to my uncle, the rest of the family. He said, I'm Tim. Nice to meet you. I got to run. And he left.
Wow.
We didn't see him. A couple of days later, my oncologist had already been in contact with me. He said, you can't just do nothing while we try to figure out how to treat you and what you're going to do. It's going to be hard, but you got to still like take some classes. Don't drop out of all your classes, do something. My second ever college class, Tuesday morning, I come out of class. I'm in the cafeteria. Now, this is before flat screen TVs. So I had one of those like bracket tube televisions, maybe 8 inches size. It's hanging from the corner of the ceiling and the wall there. And I'm sitting there eating breakfast and a plane hits the Twin Towers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So I call my dad. He's back at my uncle's house. It's like, hey, are you watching the news? And I'm like, yeah, did you see that? He's like, yeah, it's crazy. Bam. All of a sudden, while we're watching on the phone, another plane hits the Twin Tower. And we're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? He's like, you better hop in the car, head back to your uncle's. It took me 8 hours to drive what was normally 15 minutes.
Sheesh.
I'm watching the Twin Towers in the distance, listening to AM radio. I have a master's degree in broadcast journalism now. I will never listen to AM radio for that long again, if it even exists anymore.
Yeah.
And riveting listening to this. I ran out of gas in my uncle's neighborhood. We pushed my car into his driveway and we shed some tears, said some prayers, panicked. We couldn't get a hold of my uncle. My aunt was beside herself. He ended up calling 7, 8 o'clock at night and said, hey, I'm okay. The phones have been out. My flight never left he was in business on Denver the night before. I'm fine. I'll take a flight tomorrow. And we're like, oh, thank God. But then he said, but Tim, his best friend, was in the towers that morning and he died.
Oh, man.
And at that moment, and I tell you this whole story because the question you asked is poignant. At what point did I realize in my life, like what was really important? You might say it was at that moment, Bob, you realize how precious life was. And it's actually not the case. We were devastated. Obviously, my uncle and my aunt just felt terrible that Tim was gone. and had to tell his wife. And it was a horrible situation. It took 4 to 5 months to finish my treatments. I went through chemotherapy. It was very challenging. I have all kinds of other stories, some of them comical about this, but in the instance of time, it took months to recover physically and kind of get through the mental aspect. But I dove right back into college and sports and life as soon as I was treated. It was an extremely aggressive form of cancer, but it was highly treatable, thank God. And I almost died, but once they found it, my doctor was super confident that I would have been fine. And I went through life for the next couple of years at the same mindset, like I beat cancer, I'm invincible. I did everything the doctor told me. I drank 132 ounces of water a day. I got 8.5 hours of sleep. I went to bed before 9 o'clock. I got up at a certain hour. I never ate any sugar. I ate the exact amount of I mean, I did everything the doctor told me to do. And my mindset was that I was the perfect cancer patient ever. When in reality, it took years for me to work through those emotions and actually kind of let it out, if you will. And I realized there were numerous other forces going on there that actually helped me get through this. One of them, the one that I could actually identify, was Tim. His generosity, like I never met the guy before, and he was willing to basically give my parent. I mean, I'm sure they would have given it back, but there was no parameters like, hey, I need this in a week. It was here, take my car for as long as you need it. And so it took about a couple of years for me to realize that life is not something that we're designed to do alone. You know, humanity is designed to be together in community and help each other. And Tim worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. Every single one who was in the office that morning died in the firm. He was an expert in financial markets, investment banking, interest rates. Like that's what he lived. He probably worked 60-hour weeks doing that for 20, 30 years. But that wasn't in the moment what was needed. He just, whatever he could possibly do to help his best friend's nephew and family is what he needed to do. And so my encouragement to people out there is there's something that you're good at that you probably can change the world and you probably spend a lot of time on. And so I encourage you to keep doing that. But there's also times in life where we just kind of need to react in what feels right for humanity. And it took me time to realize that. So I hope I've spent about half my life before that moment and about half of my life, before my illness, and about half after now. I'm at that age where I hope that the past 20 years or so have really been me pouring in as much as I can to other people, while not forgetting about my own health, because obviously I have a medical history. I still get checked all the time. But it's really about putting that mindset, or giving yourself the mindset that we actually have tremendous power to change someone's world. And one of the best quotes I ever heard was, "We may never change the world, but we might change the world for one person."
Wow, this is incredible. We've run out of time, and I wish we hadn't, because I'm very empowered by this interview, and thank you so much. It sounds like Tim was an angel, and he had his purpose, and you are lifting up his memory by continuing a legacy and helping other people and using the power of love to light the way. Thank you so much, Bob, for being on A Little Less Fear podcast. How can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you?
Easiest place, bobdepasquale.com is my website. You can find all my links, podcast, everything on there. And I'm at BDEPA, BDEPA. And you can find me on most social platforms with that handle.
And your book, where can we find your book?
Personal Finance in a Public World, How Technology, Social Media, and Ads Affect Your Money Decisions. It's on Amazon. It's on Audible. It's Barnes & Noble. You can find it pretty much anywhere.
Excellent. Thanks, Bob. Thanks so much for sharing your light, your wisdom, your energy. And I look forward to chatting again in the near future and to reading Personal Finance. Thank you so much for all your time.
You got it. Awesome. Continue with the best in the show, man. Love what you're doing.
Thank you. What an incredible insight coming from an energetic, compassionate, loving, motivated cancer survivor, incredible human being on this planet, here to motivate us all. Thank you so much for sharing your light. And thanks again to all the new followers and subscribers. If you haven't followed me yet, go ahead and click the follow button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. You can also check me out on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube at A Little Less Fear Podcast, on Instagram at A Little Less Fear Podcast, on LinkedIn at Dr. Lino Martinez, on Twitter at A Little Less Fear, and pick up a copy of my book if you haven't yet on Amazon The title of the book is A Little Less Fear, and it's also available on Kindle. Thanks so much. Love you all so much. Thank you for the support.